Hello, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Layla. Today, I'm going to give y'all a wrap-up of the books that I read in December 2023. I know we're already more than halfway through January, but I just, needed some time to get this done. I wasn't sure if I was going to continue these videos just because this isn't the content that I typically post on my channel, just because I've more recently gotten into talking about books on YouTube. But I think I want to still give it a shot, at least I'm gonna do December and the first couple of months of the new year, but after that I'll just kind of see how I'm feeling. And plus I really just want to vlog more and incorporate the books that I read into my vlogs. But I know oftentimes I would end up talking about the books that I was reading, like giving a review, and not everybody wants to hear the full review of a book that I read, so that's why I started making these. But I read 4 books in December. I wanted to read 5 and I almost finished 5. But I ended up finishing that book. I started a 5th book, but finished it in the new year. I also wanted to get through my whole fall TBR, and I did almost, actually. I read 14 books in the fall, so I think that was just October, November, December. I read 14 books, but I had 15 on my list, and of those 15, I think 2 of them I did not read. I replaced with a different book just because I started reading them and I DNF'd them, or I just wasn't in the mood for it. So I went to a different book. That also made me not want to film TBR videos because I didn't really like feeling like I had to read the books that I put in that video. And not just because I'm making the video, but even just following my own rules. No, you said you would read this, so you have to read it in this quarter or whatever it is that I'm focused on. And I don't really like that because I'd rather just pick up a book when I want to pick it up, that's kind of the exciting part. And I don't want to, I feel like if you force yourself to read something that you're not in the mood for, then you're going to get into a book slump, and it makes reading not as enjoyable, I have so many exciting books for 2024 though, so I do want to just continue talking about them because they make me happy, and I think they're just so exciting. Let me talk about these 4 books though, okay? So the first one that I read in December was The Good Daughter by Karin Slaughter. And this was recommended by my sister. Actually, my sister's not a huge reader, but she did read a lot more books this past year. She read a lot of, or listened to a lot of audiobooks, and this was one of them. And I know that she also liked the book Pretty Girls, I think it is, by Karin Slaughter. But she mentioned that she thought this one was better than Pretty Girls. So I bought this. Clearly I bought it used. It looks like it's in pretty rough shape. And this book, it doesn't look huge, but it's pretty hefty. And the pages, the text, the font is pretty small, and there's over 500 pages in here. So this took me almost half of the month. There's 511 pages. So that's a pretty long book and tiny text, so it just took me a while to get through this. Because my sister had such great things to say about this book, I had pretty high expectations, but to be honest, it wasn't that good to me, and I've already told her about this, so it's okay. The beginning was good. It started off strong. It was actually really scary. I remember the first few chapters I was reading while I was walking on the treadmill, and there was a part that it's what nightmares are made of. One of my biggest fears, actually. Not the literal fear, but just that situation or any situation similar to it. But that, I remember feeling so stressed while reading that. Also, I suggest reading the trigger warnings for this book. I suggest that for really... You probably, if you're sensitive to any sort of triggers, just check the trigger warnings of all books, but this one definitely. So I remember at the beginning I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be really good because it was so scary, and it started off like that. That's almost in the first chapter. But then it quickly kind of slowed down after that. There was just a lot of course, they were lawyers, and I can't remember even their names right now, to be honest. I know it was sisters, but they weren't close, and one sister was much closer to the father, and yeah, it was just it was documenting primarily this one sister, and then she ended up being part of another murder situation. And yeah, there was kind of a twist at the end, but to me it wasn't a super satisfying twist, I guess. Toward the end, it's there's a scene that is very descriptive that I found very disturbing. It's one of those that I would I remember on that one I was also walking on the treadmill, but it was one where I had to put the book down for a second and just like sigh, or it like caused me to sigh or breathe heavily because it was very detailed. I think this book would be probably better as an audiobook, like maybe if you're into like a scary thing going on in the background. To me though, this was like 100, maybe even 200 pages too long. There was just a lot of filler and things in here that I don't feel like added to the story. Like a lot of it just kind of felt like fluff in there, and maybe it did help to build up things, but to me this could have been much shorter. I wouldn't say that it's not worth reading, like it's still a pretty good book, but not one of my favorites. Like I probably wouldn't reread it, maybe parts of it just to like get into the scary scenes, but probably would not reread. I would give this out of 5 stars, probably 3 stars is what I'm going to give this. After that, I started reading The Wicked King. And if y'all remember from early in 2023, I read The Cruel Prince. That's the first book in the Folk of Air series, or the Cruel Prince series trilogy. And this is the second book. And The Cruel Prince really put me into a book slump. Like it took me, I think, close to a month to read that book, and it's not a long book. It has pretty large text. So for the longest, I was putting the rest of the trilogy off. And then when I filmed my fall TBR, I was like, all right, this is kind of a fall vibe to it, or maybe a winter vibe. So I'm going to read this. I'm going to finish this trilogy. I actually had talked about this a little bit in a vlog, because this book, The Wicked King, was so good. So good. And now looking back at The Cruel Prince, there's stuff about The Cruel Prince that I still remember to this day, even though I didn't like it that much, because it was very unique and very descriptive. And I think the mistake was that that was my first fantasy book, like ever, basically. Like in the past, I've read Harry Potter, and that's about as extensive as I've gotten with like fantasy or any sort of non-real life. I'm sure there's other books, but I can't really, nothing stands out to me before The Cruel Prince. And I think I was too harsh on The Cruel Prince. Like thinking back to it, I feel like it was probably a good book. I was just not, I wasn't giving credit to a fantasy book, because for me, fantasy was very new to me, and I don't think I related to it yet as much as I do now. Like I've read a few more fantasy books throughout 2023, and now I can really respect that. Like the world building, the uniqueness of the characters. With The Cruel Prince, these are fairies, but it's not like Tinkerbell fairies. They're like battling each other, murdering each other. But there's also this split with the human world, which is really interesting, and what they can do to humans, and what how humans can protect themselves in this world. Elfham, I think it is, the world. Yeah, it's just such a unique place, and I really ended up liking this book. Like I would probably give this a 4.5 stars, which is crazy considering I think when I rated The Cruel Prince, it was probably like, 2 out of 10. This one continues following Jude. The main character is Jude, and she is honestly just a badass. Like she will literally do whatever it takes to get what she wants, and I think she's badass for it. And there were parts that I finished this book really quickly, like within maybe 3 days or so. Like I just wanted to keep on going. And there was one part that I remember, and I found it before I started filming this. This is at the end of chapter 16. And it says, "Your ridiculous family might be surprised to find that not everything is solved by murder." And then she says, "We would be surprised to find that." So that kind of describes her and her family. Like they will literally just like, if they don't like something, I'll just kill him type of thing. So I thought it was in such a good way. I don't know how to explain that unless you read it. But if The Cruel Prince is going to be your first fantasy, I don't suggest that. Like this is an easy trilogy. Maybe it should be. I don't know. I'm not the best person to ask when it comes to fantasy, but if you don't have a respect for fantasy yet, I don't think you should start with this book, because I think The Cruel Prince had a slow build up, but I feel like I need to go back and reread it knowing what I know now. This was fun. This was the best in the trilogy, because right after this, the other thing too is usually when I read fantasy, I skip the next book in the series and go to something else to give myself a break from fantasy. But I went straight to The Queen of Nothing. And I also read this in like 3-4 days. This one was not as good, I will say, but it was still very interesting. This continues to follow Jude, and she, again, is just doing whatever it takes to get what she wants. And this one ends, the Wicked King ends on a big twist. Like, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And then it starts back, right, it goes right into what happened at the end of that and starts here. So I really liked having the cliffhanger, and that's what made me come to this book. So I was like, okay, I need to know what happens now. This one was still really good. I would probably give it a 4 out of 5, maybe like a 3.7 or so out of 5, because it wasn't as like captivating as The Wicked King. And yeah, I feel like I need to go back and read The Cruel Prince, because that rating that I gave it in the past, I don't think it deserves that. The thing she comes up with in this, it's just so cool to me. The world of Elfhame or whatever. Yeah, all in all, I am glad that I continued this trilogy, and I think it's actually worth reading. Just give it a shot, like give it a chance for sure, and don't stop after The Cruel Prince, because it does get better. This actually made me want to continue reading about Jude and Cardan and the characters. There were some characters that I really despised in these books, but then like Jude and a couple of the others, I really liked them. I liked her sister Vivian, I think her name is, and the other human, Vivian's girlfriend. I liked her, and then even there was a character that you like really don't like throughout, but then you start to like her. So yeah, it's just a really nice storytelling and good character development across the board for like all the characters. It made me want to read her other books. So after this, there's like How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories, and I think Cardan, who is the King of Elfhame, I think he goes to the human world or something, and that would be really interesting. So yeah, I want to read these other ones. There's The Darkest Part of the Forest, and then The Coldest Girl in Cold Town, all by Holly Black. So I'll probably check those out. Okay, and then the fourth book that I started and finished is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. And this type of book is just not for me. This is not my favorite type of reading. This was very historical. It is a fiction book, but not based on real events, but obviously the war and the time of the Holocaust and that sort of thing was a real thing that happened. And this kind of covers that. I don't know. I thought at first this is really good. It starts off from the perspective of death. I thought that was really interesting. Like the person the view that you're seeing is from death's view, like the Grim Reaper type of thing. I thought that was really interesting. It was a little bit confusing at first, but then I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. But then I feel like it wasn't from the perspective of death the whole time. Like it wasn't consistent, and to me that kind of threw me off. It made me not like the writing because it was from his or her perspective, and then it was just kind of telling a story, and like it was like you were watching a movie or something. Like this is what's happening. And I don't know, like the Book Thief, the title Book Thief, to me the character in this is not like it's a little misleading. I think she steals like at the end of the day like 2 books or something, and I mean, she was taking books from fires and stuff, like books she wasn't supposed to be reading, and then eventually from somebody's house, but like the person she was stealing from knew about it, and like I wouldn't say she was a book thief per se. So I thought that was interesting that she was called that. The mom in this girl ends up going to like a foster family. What's her name? Liesel, duh. She ends up going into a foster family. I don't know why the mom is like so nasty. I feel like it's just, I guess it's her personality. She's not like a bad person per se, but she just is like, says mean things. And then her foster father is much nicer, and she starts learning how to read because of him and the books that she steals. Somebody ends up at their house who's not supposed to be there, and she grows a strong relationship with this guy. And I don't want to give it away, but yeah, it's kind of just following her story along with her friends. And a lot of people cry in this book, I believe, but I did not. There was a part where I felt a little like teary-eyed, but no tears came out, and it was really just the way it was being described. So yeah, it didn't make me cry otherwise, but it's a sad book overall. Like there's a lot of bad things happening, and because this was probably what a lot of people went through or something similar to this during that time, it does make it more sad. This is another book that I feel like was 100, 200 pages too long. I think this was also 500. Yeah, 550 pages. There were parts, I don't know that I really liked the format of this book either. So each part started with like this little title, but then it would go through these list of like featuring what's going to be in this part. And I just stopped reading that because it was like a waste of time. Like I literally never was remembering what I read on this page, like what was about to happen, because it was just like words. A good girl, a Jewish fist fighter, the wrath of Rosa, a lecture, a sleeper, the swapping of nightmares, and some pages from the basement. Like I never remembered that going into the chapter. It was also, there was a lot of breaks between things. And I don't know that I really liked that because it felt distracting or almost like just not consistent. There were these bolded sections throughout the whole book. Yeah, you see here how it's like normal paragraphs and then these weird sections of random content. Like sometimes I don't know if I even like comprehended them just because they weren't always adding to the story, or it was just over my head for whatever reason. So this is not a book that I would read again personally, but I understand and respect why people like it. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 3, really, because this is just not my style of book. I'm not too much into history, even if it is fiction. And honestly, I'm probably going to get rid of this book. The book I started reading after that was The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry, but I didn't finish that until January. I really tried to finish it in December, but was not able to finish. So I will talk about that next month when I wrap up January. But that was everything that I read in December. Overall, not too bad of a reading month. Definitely a couple of long books in there. So I'm pretty impressed with myself that I finished 2 books over 500 pages in 1 month. But that's it for this video. Please comment down below what y'all read in December. Anything you recommend. Let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video.